So today we're reading from I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu story. The chapter entitled Arriving on the Scene, a Good Fight. Prabhupada was so moved by the man's simple act of devotion that for several months he could not speak. He just looked down, closed his eyes. Finally, with a choked voice, he said, several moments, "Such a simple man, yet somehow he understood that a saintly person is here, and he gathered some flowers to offer." In the Bhagavad-gita, Lord Krishna says, "Patram pushpam phalam toyam, yome bhaktya prayachati, taraham bhakti paritam, ashnami praya tatmanaha." If one offers me a leaf or a flower with love and devotion, I will accept it. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and even his heart is touched by such devotion. What to speak of an insignificant living entity like me? How much more I will feel overwhelmed. Here was hitting the microphone. Prabhupada arranged another meeting with Chaganlal, which is again held in the room of Mr. Setis. He sat behind his desk and was joined by Mrs. Nair and her advocate, and the senior Mr. Mehta with his son. Right away, Mrs. Nair verbally attacked Chaganlal, and Shantilal Mehta counterattacked. They fought bitterly, giving vent to years of hatred. Mrs. Nair despised Shantilal Mehta so much that she was ready to let things drag on for years rather than give in to him, and he felt the same way. He didn't care if his 50,000 rupees was tied up with her. He wasn't going to surrender. Prabhupada let them fight for a while and then said, "Now let's forget. What's done is done. Let's forget about it." He pacified them, and they started talking civilly. But the animosity soon erupted again, and they resumed fighting. Prabhupada again had to pacify them and appealed to them to quiet down. And eventually, when their fighting passions came down to a smolder, he said, "Now let us discuss." Just then, Mr. Ganatra, the former mayor, walked in and started glorifying Srila Prabhupada, offering obeisances and prayers. He was a well-known and popular figure, and Mr. Mehta knew him. "Swamiji," Mr. Ganatra said, "I came for your darshan. I had no idea I would be walking into this." "Maybe you can help me," Prabhupada suggested, and he explained the situation. "Don't worry," Mr. Ganatra assured him. "I will take care of it." And he took Mr. Mehta and his son into another room. While Ganatra was speaking with Chaganlal in the other room, Prabhupada spoke with Mrs. Nair. "How much are you willing to pay?" he asked. "Well, we have to pay the 50,000 he gave us, plus we'll give him 25,000, that's all. You have to pay the rest. If he has an extra claim, you have to pay." "Why should we pay?" Prabhupada questioned. "I'm already paying you for the land. This is your problem with Chaganlal." When Mr. Ganatra entered the room, everyone wanted to know how much the metas were demanding. He wants 4 lakhs, Mr. Ganatra said. 4 lakhs? Oh no, that's impossible, Mrs. Nair retorted. We can't pay that. How much are you willing to pay? Ganatra asked. We can pay 75,000. He is asking 4 lakhs, and you want to pay 75,000? No, no, you have to do better than that. We have to settle this. Prabhupada appealed to Mrs. Nair to offer more, and he said, all right. And she said, all right, 1 lakh. Then Ganatra returned to the metas. Meanwhile, Prabhupada was encouraging Mrs. Nair to pay more if necessary. The rest of us couldn't wait to hear what Mr. Ganatra would say when he returned. Finally, he came back and told us, I have persuaded him to come down to 3,25,000, but that's it. I don't think he's going to come down any lower. You'll have to come up with a lot more than 1 lakh. I thought, oh no, there's such a gulf. But Prabhupada appealed to Mrs. Nair to offer more. All right, she said, 1,25,000, that's all. She was starting to get upset. Mr. Ganatra went back to Chugganlal. The situation was tense. I was feeling anxious. I didn't know what Chugganlal would demand next. It seemed that the negotiations could break down at any moment. When Mr. Ganatra returned, he said that Chugganlal would settle for 2,25,000, or either that or nothing. Otherwise, he'll go to court, and either he'll get 6 lakhs or he'll get the land. So he wants 2,25,000, and that's it. Now, what are you going to do? It was intense. Everyone was sweating and squirming. And Mr. Ganatra was coaxing. Srila Prabhupada conferred with Mrs. Nair. Finally, she said, all right, I'll pay 1,40,000, and that's it. And Prabhupada told Ganatra to offer 2,25,000, hinting that he would cover the difference. I don't know what he'll say, Ganatra told us, and he went back to Chugganlal. Some minutes later, he returned with a big smile on his face. They have agreed. The 2 metas, father and son, followed Ganatra into the room. Everyone was relieved and elated. Now today, 2,25,000 doesn't sound like much, right? But we're talking about 1973 or 72. 2,25,000 was a lot of money, right? Now how much you have to pay to buy a car? Today, not expensive one, ordinary car, Maruti car, how much you have to pay? Minimum 5, right? In those days, you could buy the Ambassador for 25,000 rupees, right? So money in those days had some value. 25,000 rupees, you could buy a car, right? Prabhupada had 3 cars. 1 car was here in Juhu, 1 car was in Vrindavan, 1 car was in Mayapur. His car that we bought for him here in Juhu is still there. It's in the basement. And the one in Mayapur is still there. You know where it's at? It's in the Pushpa Samadhi. It's still there. Ambassador. But the one in Vrindavan, it's gone. I think the rust got it. So, although these figures don't sound like much, but in those days it was a lot of money. In fact, Prabhupada bought this property for 12 lakhs of rupees. What's it worth today? 12 lakhs. And when he made the deal, he didn't have the money. He didn't have 12 lakhs of rupees. He paid some token money and made the deal. And then the fight started, so many things. But when he really needed the money to pay and finalize it, then he contacted the New York Temple. And the New York Temple at those days was in Brooklyn in Henry Street. And they had two houses. They were called brownstone houses because they were like, the front of them was brown stone. And they went straight up. One floor, ground floor, first floor, and the second floor. And there were two next to each other. But it was very crowded. I remember the first time I went to Henry Street, devotees were sleeping on the stairs. And they had one shower. And it was so crowded that your shower couldn't be more than 5 seconds. The shower is actually just a bathtub with a black plastic curtain around it. And if you got in the shower, then immediately after 5 seconds, come on, Prabhu, get out. Next. And devotees, they were all busy. They were out on Sankirtan. So one devotee would stay back and do the laundry for all the devotees. And then, when you wanted a dhoti or if you wanted a kurta, you just go to this big barrel where all the dhotis are and another barrel where all the kurtas are. It was common. Nobody had a dhoti, nobody had a kurta. You just picked one from the barrel. So the devotees didn't waste time, each doing their laundry, right? And then in the evening, I saw that it was so crowded in Henry Street that the devotees were sleeping on the stairs. Have you ever tried to sleep on stairs? It's pretty tough. So needless to say, the devotees wanted a bigger place, and they wanted a better location. They wanted to be in Manhattan. See, New York is separated by what they call boroughs. There's the Brooklyn borough, there's the Bronx borough. So they're divided. And then in the main area is Manhattan, right? So at that time, the devotees were in Brooklyn and they wanted to go to Manhattan. And they had saved up some money so that they could buy a place in Manhattan. Manhattan is where all the action is, not in Brooklyn. So they wanted to get a place in Manhattan, and they had saved up some money. And somehow or another, Srila Prabhupada, he got in touch with Gopijana Vallabha, was the temple president at the time. Gopijana Vallabha Prabhu, very humble devotee, was the New York temple president. And Prabhupada contacted him and said, I need money to buy the land in Juhu. So what did Gopijana Vallabha do? He immediately took all the money they had and sent it to Prabhupada. Today, if you tell the temple president, give all the money, you're not going to get it. I don't care who you are. But in those days, devotees were so surrendered to Srila Prabhupada, he said, give the money, and they gave it. And that's how Hare Krishna land was purchased. The two Mettas, father and son, followed Ganatra into the room. Everyone was relieved and elated, so much had hinged on this issue. Then I realized that Mr. Ganatra must have been exaggerating their claim and determination with Mrs. Nair and exaggerating Mrs. Nair's unwillingness when he met Jagannath. It had seemed like there was a huge gulf, but that was to get them to come down because our offer was so low, and to get Mrs. Nair to come up because their demand was so high. And eventually we had met in the middle. Jagannath came down from 400,000 to 225,000. Mrs. Nair came up from 75,000 to rupees 140,000, and Prabhupada agreed to pay Jagannath the difference of 85,000. Anyway, we were all relieved and elated and amazed by Prabhupada's expertise and kindness. It was only out of both Shantilal Mehta and Mrs. Nair's deep respect and admiration for him that they were able to even come and sit together in the same room and talk. With everyone still gathered, Prabhupada spoke about his mission and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and he asked me to lead the singing of the Nrsimha prayers. In the end, everyone was happy. It was decided that there would be another meeting, and we and Mrs. Nair would pay Jagannath their money, and that they would withdraw the suit, and neither side would tell the solicitors. You see how Prabhupada avoided lawyers? Note that. Prabhupada didn't like it. He knew that if you involve lawyers, it'll wind up in court. Because what do lawyers do? They go to court. They don't make money by looking at your face. They make money when they go to court. So if you involve lawyers, where are you headed? You're headed to court. Right? If you want to get legal advice, lawyers don't make any money by giving you legal advice. They make money when you litigate. So what is their bent? Where are they headed? If you go for, quote unquote, legal advice, you're going to court. And what happens in court? You waste time and you waste money. So Prabhupada made this settlement internally amongst parties with keeping the lawyers out of it. It's a very important lesson we can learn. It's always better to settle than it is to go to court. Right? And even today, there's so many court cases. One judge has millions of court cases in front of him. I forget what, some figure was there in the Allahabad High Court. Hundreds of thousands of cases are pending there. Now it's called Prayagraj High Court, right? So they're taxed, their brains taxed, the judges, so many different matters. How can you get justice? In Kali Yuga, the only way to get justice is by paying. If you have money, you can get justice. No money, no justice. It's not like before, kings would make a judgment. They'd be able to decide things quickly. When Maharaj Parikshit saw that the Shudra dressed as a king, the personality of Kali, was beating a cow, he didn't go to the court. What did he do? He immediately drew his sword and was prepared to kill him. Right? And this is there. So many histories. Even in the Bible it's there. Solomon. There were two ladies that were fighting over a child. It's my child. No, it's my child. So what King Solomon did? He said, give me that child. He took out his sword and he said, I'm going to kill this child. And one of the ladies said, no, 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 don't do that. Let her have it. So then Solomon could understand that this child belonged to that lady, not the other one. So the kings previously were very wise, and they could make judgments very quickly. Even Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was a magistrate, he would decide all of his cases very quickly, write the orders, right? Save so much time. How could he do that? Because a Krishna conscious mind is very focused. Right? The Krishna conscious devotee doesn't want to waste time. Court means simply wasting time. Prabhupada never wanted us to go to court. Never. And we see by this example that he settled this whole thing, keeping the lawyers out of it. So that's an important lesson for us to learn. As a result of the negotiations, Mehta agreed to withdraw his suit from the High Court for a payment of 140,000 rupees, white from 140,000 rupees white from Mrs. Nair, and 85,000 rupees black from us. But the transaction was tricky because if he paid Mehta first, he could keep the money and not withdraw the case. And if he withdrew the suit first, we could not keep the money. We could just keep the money, especially because nothing could be done legally to enforce a black transaction. See how tricky legal, even if you want to legally settle it, it's not an easy thing. You have to be very careful. And I can tell you so many stories about that, but this is being recorded, so I probably better not. But I do have some experience. All the principal parties, other than Mrs. Nair, met in the office of our solicitor, Mr. Bisenia, and Mula. Mr. Bisenia at Mula. Mula is a very big law firm in Bombay, very famous, Mula. Another one is Kanga & Company, very big firm. The basic plan was discussed, but there was a major hitch. Who would hold the black money? As Tamal Krishna later described, it was a gentleman's agreement, but there weren't any gentlemen anymore, so nobody trusted anyone else. There can be gentlemen's agreement if there's gentlemen. If there are no gentlemen, where's the gentleman's agreement? So they didn't trust each other. Who would hold the black money? With the whole plan threatened, the atmosphere in the office was tense. No one was ready to trust anyone else with the money. Then Prabhupada meekly, almost sheepishly, offered, I can hold it. And everyone immediately concurred because they knew they could trust him. And that's the nature of a pure devotee, is that everybody gets the feeling that here's a person I can trust. Devotees who surrender to Srila Prabhupada and do surrender to Srila Prabhupada. Why? Because they know they can trust him. Why do devotees think they can trust Prabhupada. Even non-devotees. Mrs. Nair was not a devotee. Chuggan Lal was not a devotee, but they knew. In the prayers to the six Goswamis, it's there, Dhira Dhir, Brajanat Paro. The study, the steady, the unsteady means the rascals and the non-rascals. They all trusted the six Goswamis. Whenever they had some dispute, they would go to the six Goswamis for the settlement. Why? Because they knew this is going to be a fair settlement. So this quality of trusting Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, just see his humility. The word sheepishly is used. Does everybody know what that means? Maybe half of you don't even know English, I don't know. But sheepishly means very kind of timidly suggested. That's humility. Here he is, the guru, first time ever of thousands of foreigners. Right? You know what that meant? Never happened before. But very humble, very meek. Srila Prabhupada tells a story about the father of Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru's father, Motilal. They were also from, in those days, Allahabad, lawyers, rich people, right? In fact, Motilal Nehru was so rich that he could afford to keep a British servant. Okay? So after independence, he had this British servant, and his friends would advise him, why you're spending so much money on this British servant? What you're paying him, you can keep 10 Indian servants. He said, yes, but the British kept us, Indians, as their servants for hundreds of years. So I want to show that at least an Indian can keep one British servant. But just see Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada had thousands, not only British, but American servants also. And they were ready to do anything for him. And guess what? He didn't pay him anything. So how much he had to be proud of, but yet he was very humble, very meek, sheepishly suggesting, right? But because of his trustworthiness, his attachment to Krishna, and trying to satisfy Krishna, and not having any other agenda except to satisfy Krishna, everyone could trust him. The senior Mr. Mehta stayed with Prabhupada in the solicitor's chamber, and others went to the court to withdraw the claim. Then when Mr. Mehta's son and the others returned, he got his money. Prabhupada later summarized the settlement. Chuggan advanced 41,000, and when there was a question of settlement, he came. He wanted that, quote, if you give me 3 lakhs, then I'll compromise. So that Mr. Ganatara, the mayor, I induced him, just make settlement. Then Chuggan came down, 2,25,000. Then I asked Mr. Nair, now you'll pay this. Mrs. Nair, you'll pay this. Where have I got? If he takes all money, then what shall I get? Then I had to settle with her how much she would pay. She came from 1 lakh to 1,40,000. So what is the balance? 85. So I said, yes, I'll pay it. Settle up. The balance I'll pay, 85,000. That Chaganlal, I paid him extra 85,000. That is also black, no more white. The black money was paid in this way, that the money was counted and it was put into a handbag, and it was locked by him. The key was with him, and the bag was with me. As soon as court accepted the agreement, then I handed over. Take this bag. At Mr. Sethi's house, Prabhupada received an invitation from Yogi Raj Shanti Swarup, a life member and spiritual activist, to be the guest of honor at the opening night of a series of lectures and discussions to be held at the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Girgaon Chowpatty, South Bombay, on the subject of how the Bhagavad-gita could solve the world's problems, founded by Sri Kaniyalal M. Munshi in 1938 under the patronage of Mahatma Gandhi. Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan was a leading, quote, educational, cultural, and intellectual, unquote, institution for Indian culture. After K.M. Munshi's demise, his wife, Lilavati Munshi, who herself had been a prominent freedom fighter and was a politician, author, and social worker, became president. Mrs. Munshi was eager to meet Prabhupada, and she extended a personal invitation for him to join her for tea in the library of her quarters, also in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan building. Just before the conference, mindful of her having used her influence as the governor's wife to push Prabhupada out of the premises housing his League of Devotees, a forerunner of ISKCON, when he was in Jhansi in 1955, so that she could use it for her Mahila Samiti, Women's Association. Prabhupada, Shyamasundar, Shrutakirti, and I went to meet her. Several other important people and conference presenters, sadhus, swamis, and political figures were also there to meet Prabhupada, including Sri Gujari Lal Nanda, who had been Minister of Home Affairs in the central government and acting Prime Minister after the deaths of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1964 and Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri in 1966. He was a celebrated personality in India, revered for his religiousness and promotion of Hindu principles and projects. But within this group of esteemed leaders, everyone accepted Prabhupada as the leader. Srila Prabhupada tells a story. He was on a morning walk in the Victoria Memorial, which is in Calcutta. And he said that he'd always been a leader, even amongst his friends. He was a leader. Srila Prabhupada was always the leader. So when he was small, with his friends, they were playing. And at that time, the Victoria Memorial was under construction in the 1800s. And there was a huge scaffolding that went all the way to the top. And Srila Prabhupada, he's on a morning walk with the devotees. And he said, as the leader of the boys, I climbed that scaffolding all the way to the top of the Victoria Memorial. And one of the devotees said to Srila Prabhupada, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, You were so brave. And Prabhupada said, still I'm brave. Otherwise, how could I go to America all alone? Srila Prabhupada ki. But the point is, Srila Prabhupada was always a leader. When Prabhupada was seated, everyone started praising him for the wonderful work he had done in spreading Indian culture throughout the world. Mrs. Munshi, in particular, was astonished by his success. How did you do it? She kept asking. How did you get them to shave their heads? How did you get them to wear dhotis and kurtas and tilak? How did you get the girls to wear saris? Prabhupada explained that although there had been many editions of the Bhagavad-gita, it had not been presented, quote, as it is, unquote. And there had not been any programs to train students to follow its principles. Although there were many branches and institutions of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, both within and outside India, and although they were disseminating books, there was no program for training young men and women to become followers of Vedic culture. Books are required, and also training, and he had given them both. What an amazing answer, to the point, specific, and complete. Training and knowledge. Mrs. Munshi brought up a point that was on many people's minds. Quite often, when the founder of a mission is present, she said, the mission is very successful. It's flourishing and prospering. But after the founder leaves, things deteriorate. So what will be the future of your movement after you go? The future of my mission is very bright, Prabhupada replied. As long as my disciples follow my instructions, just like Gandhiji, he had so many programs, but after he left, his followers changed everything. He wanted village organizations. He wanted the economy to be based on agriculture after he left. Nehru and others changed the whole program. They wanted to industrialize India and imitate the West. So he had his program, but after he left, his so-called followers changed everything, and everything became spoiled. So, in the same way, if I leave and my followers change what I have given, what can I do? By saying this, I realized Prabhupada was challenging us, his followers, with the responsibility of remaining faithful to his instructions. So everybody who's a follower of Srila Prabhupada, raise your hand. Good. Pretty much everybody. So you have a big responsibility. Very big responsibility. As followers of Srila Prabhupada, to not change anything. But how will you not change anything unless you know what he wanted? Right? So therefore, reading Srila Prabhupada's books is absolutely necessary, absolutely important, so that you're not blindly following anybody. Okay, you're a follower of Srila Prabhupada, but what are you following? Right? You know, in those days, some devotees, they just were attracted by Srila Prabhupada. They may not have been so philosophically inclined, but they were surrendered to Prabhupada, and that was okay. He was physically present, but today he's not physically present. You can't blindly follow. You shouldn't blindly follow anything. So reading Srila Prabhupada's books, absolutely necessary, so that you know what you're following, and also, as Srila Prabhupada's followers, that you don't change anything. Right? You understand that? Everybody got that? Okay, good. It's an important point. One bearded sadhu said that he had been holding meetings throughout Bombay and teaching people to cure their diseases by chanting God's name. Thousands of people were attending, and many were getting cured. He suggested that there could be some cooperation between himself and Prabhupada, that together they could hold massive meetings for chanting Hare Krishna, whereby many more people could benefit. I am gathering people together, and you are gathering people together, he said. I'm getting people to chant God's name, and you're getting people to chant. We should cooperate. No, Prabhupada said. This is against our principles. The name of God is God himself, and we are God's servants. We do not use the holy name of God for our sense gratification or material purposes. We chant the holy name without any personal ambition, simply to glorify and serve the holy name. So we cannot participate in any such program. Then Mrs. Munshi disclosed another special purpose of her hosting Prabhupada. She wanted to sell him Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan's printing press, the Associated Press. It was a big press that had been one of the best in India, printing religious books and phone directories and handling many government contracts. But it was a letterpress operation, and the publishing field had turned to photo offset, which produced a higher quality and less expensive product. In fact, Associated Press had lost their government contracts, their primary means of support, and was in financial trouble. Prabhupada listened to the proposal and asked some questions, but he was already dealing with Dai Napan, who had the best, most advanced facility and wasn't interested in the outdated machinery. Actually, to purchase your press is no difficulty, he said. Money, I have no problem. However, your press has no utility. Mrs. Munshi was disappointed, but there was nothing she could do to convince him, and it was time for the conference to begin in the auditorium. Prabhupada actually wanted to return to Juhu to work on the land matter, but everyone insisted that he address the audience. They had even wanted him to lead the entire 3-day conference because his age, wisdom, stature, and accomplishments elevated him beyond the other participants. Swamiji, Swamiji, one of them implored, speaking for everyone. Only you can lead us. You are the real leader. You are the only one who can solve our problems. That's a fact, Prabhupada replied. But are you prepared to follow? And that was really the issue. Still, the group wouldn't take no for an answer. Yogi Raj Shanti Swarup threw himself at Prabhupada's feet and begged him to come, saying that the audience would be packed with leading Mumbai people, and the press and many important officials would be there. Finally, Prabhupada agreed, and we all went down to the auditorium. Bharadwaj led a kirtan to begin, and then Prabhupada spoke, indirectly answering Mrs. Munchi's question about how he had accomplished so much with his disciples. He explained the Dharma of the living entity, service to God. Is there anybody who can say boldly, I do not serve anyone? He asked. Whether you become a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or this or that, your real characteristic is that you have to serve. That service attitude, when it is understood, is applied. When it is misunderstood, is applied to Maya, and we are not happy. When it is applied to Krishna, then we are happy. You must render service. That is your position. You cannot become the master. For what does Krishna come? Does he come to establish Hindu Dharma, Muslim Dharma, or Christian Dharma? If Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, why would he be interested in particular type of Dharma? Hindu Dharma, Christian Dharma, Muslim Dharma? No. Therefore, after giving instruction throughout the whole Bhagavad-gita, at last Krishna says, the most confidential part of my instruction, Arjun, sarva guyatamam, is this, sarva dharmam prityaja mamekam sharanam raja. This is Dharma. If you're not surrendered soul to Krishna or God, your Dharma has no meaning. It is useless. The definition of Dharma is given by Krishna at the last stage of his instruction in the Bhagavad-gita. Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam raja. Prahlad Maharaj said, Komaram acharet pragyo dharmam bhagavatam viha. Komara. From the very beginning of childhood, one should be taught about Dharma, especially Bhagavat Dharma, the relationship with God. And actually it is happening all over the world. Since we have presented this Dharma to serve Krishna, it is working very wonderfully. We have got branches all over the world. Some of the samples you see, those who are chanting Hare Krishna mantra, these Europeans, Americans, Canadians. We have even got a branch in Iran, Mohammedans, Christians, Africans. Everyone is taking to this Dharma, this Krishna consciousness movement. Take the standard method as prescribed in the Bhagavad-gita, Prabhupada concluded, then you will be successful. The example is already there. I am preaching all over the world, Bhagavad-gita as it is. There's no fashionable interpretation. No, as it is. And how is it being accepted? So, why not in this country? In this country, Krishna consciousness is natural. Artificially, it is being cut down. Forget Krishna. This nonsense Dharma should be stopped. Take Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is being accepted all over the world. Why not in India? Why do you present competitors to Krishna? Don't do this. Take this instruction of Bhagavad-gita, that sarva dharmam parityaja mame kam sharanam braja. You will be successful. The standard is there, the instruction is there, everything is there. Why should we try to manufacture something else? Is there anybody in the world even now better than Krishna? Who can give good instructions more beneficial than Krishna? No, there is not. So take this principle, Bhagavad-gita as it is, the instruction of Gita, instruction of Krishna, and try to follow it. It will be successful. not only in India, but all over the world. That is my practical experience. Cameras flashed, and Prabhupada was covered with garlands. The sadhus, the swamis, the political leaders, all deferred to him with honor and respect. Still, for Prabhupada, working on the Juhu project was even more important than addressing the prestigious assembly, and I felt that my service was being validated. On the way out from the program, Prabhupada stood at the top of the stairs at the entrance of the building and surveyed the neighborhood. "This is one of the best places in Bombay," he said. "One day, we should have a temple here." So, are there any questions? Do we have a temple there? Oh, Chopad temple. Yeah. We have a temple there. Whatever a pure devotee says, it's bound to happen. We should have a temple here. Any questions? Comments? Realizations? Reflections? Mike? Go ahead, I'll try and repeat it. Question is, I was mentioning that in Prabhupada's physical presence, devotees were surrendered. So how to have that mood of surrender? First of all, we have to understand that spiritually, Srila Prabhupada is still very much present. In the Denver, Colorado airport, one reporter asked Srila Prabhupada that, the reporters, they would always ask some challenging question. There was a lady in a miniskirt. In those days, they had miniskirts, which means a very short skirt. And she said to Prabhupada, "Why do you shave your head?" And Prabhupada replied, "Why do you have bare legs? It's better to have a cool head and warm legs." Prabhupada was expert at replying to everything. But in that time, in Denver, Colorado, the reporter asked, "What will happen to this movement after you die?" And Srila Prabhupada replied, "I will never die." And all the devotees went, "Haribo!" He said, "Because I'll live forever in my books." So if we associate with Srila Prabhupada by reading his instructions, they're in his books. If we try to apply those in our own lives, then we'll inculcate the mood of surrender. That is being surrender. To understand the instructions and to follow them. Any other questions?
I have two questions, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
First is, can you repeat what Prahlad Maharaj said about religion?
Acha. Oh, I see.
And secondly, court cases are bound to court cases, especially the civil cases, may go long. So, what comment you would like to make?
Prahlad was a perfect example of the dharmic principle. Dharma means to always think of Krishna and never to forget Krishna. This is the basic principle of Dharma. Think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. And we see that Prahlad, although he was tortured so much by his demoniac father, still he never forgot Krishna. He always remembered Krishna in every circumstance. So this is the principle of Dharma. So forget all the other so-called dharmas. Keep this one principle in mind. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. How to remember him? Offer obeisances, chanting his holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. This is the Dharma of this age that we live in, Kali Yuga. As far as about civil cases, yeah, there are always going to be disputes, and many disputes, they wind up in litigation between the disputing parties. But Srila Prabhupada wanted us to avoid such things, and in Kali Yuga, there's becoming more and more disputes amongst people, so the cases are increasing more and more. It's not only in India that cases go on for a long time, but even now in America, the cases are also building up, and the cases are going on for a long time. So this is the nature of Kali Yuga. We can try to be insulated or protected from the effects of Kali Yuga by using our good intelligence, following the example of Srila Prabhupada, trying to settle things up without involving lawyers, etc., that we can learn, or we should learn. Okay? Any other question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My question is, building a temple is a easy art of nowadays, or better to preaching Krishna consciousness is enough?
What was the first part?
Building a temple is easy art of nowadays,
Building a temple.
or better to preach Krishna consciousness is enough?
Srila Prabhupada said that his Guru Maharaj emphasized printing books. He felt that was more important than even building temples. Printing books means distributing books, preaching. This is most important. We can have a temple, but temple is also for preaching. So in India, many temples ISKCON has built, which is very good. But the main focus can't change. And the main focus should be distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. Read them, distribute them, inculcate them in your life, and you'll be successful. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Here, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. So, in the modern times, ISKCON got so world famous. People are discussing about largest temple. They get especially newcomers. They get attracted to YouTubers. ISKCON, externally, it is attracting so many people inflow. But what are your suggestions to come back to the roots of Srila Prabhupada books?
Well, that's why in all of our temples, this daily discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam is there. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, it's stated. Revati Raman, hey, you want to give the class? Or you want to listen? Huh? In all of our temples, we're having this Bhagavatam class regularly. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Means on a regular basis. We sit, we read, we discuss Srila Prabhupada's books, and then that will be the basis for our activities. And that's how we can keep on track and not become diverted. My experience is, if you have some question about what to do, if you read Srila Prabhupada's books, the answer will come. Many times. Mostly. So again, it's becoming faithful to Srila Prabhupada depends on our ability to understand his instructions. And then we can be faithful. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Srila Prabhupada ki. SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple ki. Shri Gaur Nitai ki. Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande.
His Grace Bhima Prabhu ki jai.